Remember growing up in Harlem and Queens and the Bronx, seeing plays when you were growing up?
No, I don't remember seeing plays. I remember doing plays. I was always in my little class play, or at church I would be at the Easter play or the Christmas play that we did. But I don't remember seeing plays. My parents did send me, I took, to tap, those kind of singing lessons and stuff like that. But I saw a lot of stuff at the Apollo. I saw all of we would go once a week at least to the Apollo.
So you did, and what was going on at the Apollo then?
Well, those were the big bands you were going to see, or the comedians at that time, Buck and Bubbles, Stump and Stumpy, all the old comedians, the bands, Jimmy Lunsford, Count Basie. It would be a different band every week. So we would go. I would see a lot of that. My parents would kind of dress up and go to the Apollo and see the real entertainers.
And what was your first play that you actually did get on stage and do?
I got into a community theater group after. The actual, you mean my first professional play?
Well, no, let's talk about the community theater group.
It was run by a man named Maxwell Glanville, who had been an actor. I guess he was, he was with the old Negro Actors Guild. It was before my time. But I got introduced to it through another student. And he would put on things like hits, bits, and skits. We would do things, hits, bits, and skits, he called it. We would go to, hospitals, homes, institutions, and do plays. And we would do plays in the basement of this community center that he had worked out.
Where was the community center?
The first time when it started was over a church in Harlem, and I don't remember what church. And then I think they kicked us out, and we moved over on the east side, downstairs in one of the projects over there, and they gave us a space.
East side of Harlem?
East side of Harlem. This was in Harlem, the community theater. And so I think that was the first time I actually did a play. And it was a play that ended up going off Broadway, and that was the beginning of my so-called career.
And what was that play?
It was called Raising Hell in the Sun by Hal DeWint and Rainey Santoni. I don't know if you know Rainey. Yeah, he's out in California. And it was a takeoff on, of course, Raisin in the Sun.
Now, you were working another job then,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And what was that job?
I worked for the Department of Social Services. I had started as a grade 2 clerk, and I ended up, when I left, I was the office manager in one of the centers.
And then, how long did you do that job?
That job I did almost 20 years, because when I started even doing theater, I was doing off-Broadway. So you could always say, well, yeah, I'll be in to rehearse, but I have to work. I would just say that. So I would usually leave work and run to rehearsal, or I'll rehearse on the weekends. And you could do that off-Broadway, mostly because everyone was working. I think my first off-Broadway check was $60. I was, as an equity actor, it was $60 a week. So I had to keep a job because I had little kiddies at the time.
And then what were the jobs after that, immediately following that?
I think not much immediately following, but what it did personally is that I got the papers, Backstage and Show Business, and every Thursday I was the first one there. And I just started auditioning for anything and everything. And, you would get in a little play here, maybe a little play there, 2 lines there. I worked, I would be like the assistant stage manager, or maybe, I ran the old boards, anything at all. I didn't really know if I was going to be an actor. I knew that I would always be in the theater in some way, even if it was, in the basement. It didn't matter. I still did not think of myself as, in some ways, as a professional. I was working, 9-to-5 job every day, and raising a family.
Were you still working with the community theater in Harlem or with community theaters?
Yes, I did, because I wasn't getting many jobs at first. So I would work as the Maxwell Glanville's assistant, and help with the other actors. And I started directing a couple little scenes and stuff like that. The Negro Ensemble Company, which you mentioned, grew out of Douglas Turner Ward's play, Happy Ending and Day of Absence.
Now, were you in Happy Ending?
I was in Day of Absence.
The original Day of Absence?
The original Day of Absence.
Tell us about that.
Well, at first I had a hard time getting auditions because, nobody knew who the heck I was. And luckily, Hal DeWint, who was one of the writers of Raising Hell and the Sun, was the assistant director. And finally, like the last week, I finally got in for an audition. And I got a part in Happy Ending Day of Absence. Well, that ran for over a year.
Now, where was it running? On Broadway? Or?
No, it's off Broadway. It was down at the St. Mark's Playhouse. And it ran down there.
And that's where was this Robert Hooks?
Robert Hooks was one of the producers. Robert Hooks, Gerald Crone was involved in it. And Douglas Turner Ward, of course, wrote it and was there.
Who directed it? Robert?
Philip Meister.
Directed it?
Directed Happy Ending Day of Absence at that time.
But tell us about the play a bit.
Well, the play centered around a southern town. We were all, except one actor. It's a black cast except one white actor who was a broadcaster. A Mark Shapiro played the white actor. So they were all black actors in whiteface. And the plot was that we wake up one morning and there are no black people. And that was essentially the plot. The mayor is frantic, Douglas Turner, and he's trying to, where are the Negroes, as we would say? Where are they? Where did they go? They just disappeared. And that was the basic plot of it. What happens in the town when there are no black people? There are no Mammies, there are no Porters, there are no people to do it. And it became actually a big off-Broadway hit.
And they were reversing the minstrel show.
Right, around it. So we were all playing
convention.
White character. We had on white paint. It was obvious that, we weren't trying to, look white.
Right.
We were just people like in clown white makeup and big eyes and stuff like that. It caused a big thing. Even we had almost the attorney. I remember the Attorney General from Alabama came up with his to see it. I think he was against George Wallace. Not that he was maybe much different. So a lot of politicians came besides actors, just to, I don't know, it was that time of the civil rights and things like that. So the play became really an enormous hit. I mean, it wasn't a big theater, but it was sold out most of the time.
Okay, let's go back to Negro Ensemble.
Right.
So, Day of Absence, Happy Ending was done at Provincetown Playhouse. It was a big.
There was no Negro Ensemble.
Right, that was the workshop for Robert
Hooks, part of Robert Hooks' group theater workshop.
Right.
And so the extra people we had in the play were like people from his workshop, people who had walk-ons, or they had 3 telephone operators that they would always flash
That's
back
a funny
to.
scene.
Yeah, so, and they were people from his workshop, from Robert Hooks' workshop.
Right.
So, I think they were good people. They had Hattie Winston and Marcella Lowry, I remember Tina. And so they did the small parts of, because we had a lot of people in Day of Absence. They weren't all equity people, but they had whatever agreement they had made.
How did Negro Ensemble take off from there?
I think it was the basis of Negro Ensemble. It was a time when the Ford Foundation, I believe, was going to give $300,000, which was a huge amount of money at that time, to some black organization to produce plays. And nobody knew who it was. Many groups applied for this grant that the Ford Foundation was going to give. And I guess after all of it, that the same triumvirate who did Happy Ending Day of Absence was given the money to do this new black company.
And that was Robert Hooks, Douglas Turner Ward,
Gerald Crone.
Gerald Crone.
Right.
And Gerald was the business
person.
The business
Crone,
person.
Olin Associates, I think.
Oh.
Those were the three guys that were the bosses, or the top people.
What about your directing work off Broadway?
I haven't done a lot of directing. I'm always surprised that people even know about that. Maxwell Bountiful gave me my first directing class, like to say. It was, used to get classes. This is in community theater. And so I took it. I took anything, at that point. Yes. And the first play I ever directed, it was a small, short play, and it was, I can't remember the name of it, but Max ended up, there were two parts in it. I'll think of it in a minute. And I said, in our community theater, you could say, we read a lot of plays. If you liked the play, you could say, well, I'd like to do that or not, or he was very democratic. And so it was a two-character play, and I said, they read it once, and I said, gee, Max, I'd like to be in that. He says, I'm playing that part. He was a big guy who was scary. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, what about the other part? He said, that's already cast. I said, okay. So then he said, do you want to direct it? And I said, yeah. I said yes to anything. And then, of course, I thought for about 5 minutes, what do I know about directing? It's just what this guy taught me. But, God bless him. He was so wonderful. He said, when at the rehearsals, get somebody to do the set, who's going to be the stage manager. And he became an actor in it, and we set up. And he actually, and I had my ideas, and he listened and kind of followed along, and things he would say, I don't understand, what are you trying to do? And he just became an actor, which was the best thing. He didn't try to override me or say, this is really would be better. He didn't do that. He just let me do it.
And you worked with George C. Scott.
Yes, I did 3 things with George C. Scott.
What was the All God's Children? Where was that done?
At Circle in the Square.
Circle in the Square on Broadway?
On Broadway. That was a strange thing. I had done the Iceman Cometh there at Circle in the Square. And then when they were about to do All God's Children Got Wings, I did
Iceman, directed by, was it Jose Quintero?
No.
Ted Mann?
Ted Mann directed that. And James Earl Jones was playing Hickey in that production.
Mm-hmm.
James Earl Jones played Hickey, and I played, I forget the character, Mott, I think was his name, but there is a black character in there. So when they were going to do All God's Children Got Wings, they needed, some people to be sort of extras, because there's a scene in All God's Children where, in the first scene, the people walk up in the street, and there's, white people and black people, and they're cordial, and they say hello, and so forth. And then after the news gets out that there's an interracial relationship going on, the only other thing we had to do is we walk on opposite sides of the streets and glare at each other, because neither side liked that. So I got a job only because the stage man, they didn't want to insult black actors by asking them just to do that little part. There were parts for to 2 black women in it, but there were no real parts. So all we had to do was half of a Broadway contract was to walk around the street, and be hello, hi, hello, and then after the interracial romance got going, and then we could leave after the first act. So they didn't want to ask people and insult them, so they called me and said, well, would you know anyone that would do it? So I did that. So that was that's when I met George C. Scott, who I was crazy about. He was a great guy. And we used to play chess, in the second act when he wasn't watching, we would play chess. So when he was going to do, what was the next? Death of a Salesman, he decided to integrate the cast. And then I played whatever his partner, the friend was. I forget characters' names. So that was the second one. And then when he did directed design for Living, there's a character that comes in Act 3, Scene 2, who was the butler.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just called, didn't want to do it, so I ended up doing 3 things with George C. Scott.
Do you remember what plays you did at 54th Street with Negro Ensemble or otherwise?
At 54th Street, I did Soldier's play after, who did it originally? Adolph Caesar originated the part. When
and you took over for
I took
Adolph.
over for Adolph Caesar.
Now tell us a little bit about the Soldier's play, which became Soldier's Story
in
the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was a play it's a murder mystery. There's a man killed, that's the first thing we see, so it's not a secret, that's the first scene of the play. A sergeant in the army where there were just black troops at that time. Black troops were they were a baseball team. Black troops weren't allowed to fight until World War II. And
the Soldier's
is murdered.
play is set in what year? This is.
I don't remember. It's during World War II when Eisenhower was president. It was the first time black soldiers actually were allowed to go into combat because essentially what they said was you can't give them guns because shooting Germans is shooting white people. And so the black soldiers did all the other things that were done. They were the cooks, they were guys that cleaned up. They did all kinds of things, but they didn't let them shoot anybody. They didn't let them shoot any white people, whether they were Germans or not. It was Eisenhower who said, we need to get this done. We need them to do that. So originally they couldn't. Black soldiers would petition. It's different now. It turned around completely because black soldiers petitioned to fight, saying you could fight, but they didn't want to fight. They didn't want black soldiers. And black soldiers used to be beaten up and when they had their uniforms on, when they came home, because to remind them, that you're still a nigger now, soldier or no soldier. So that was it was a play that I did actually that dealt with that, the fact. So I think that's what Soldier's play deals with, this black soldier who's murdered, and it really is about solving who killed this black soldier. Nobody really cares, but they send an investigator down who wants to find out what really happened, who really killed him, and why was he killed.
I can remember seeing that production. I didn't see you in it. I think that was.
You probably saw Adolph.
I saw Adolph, and it was very early on. It was a incredible evening theater, very powerful, and it had a good run up there, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Because after Adolph left, I think he might have gone to do the movie version. Then I did the part of Sergeant Waters, who is the guy that's murdered. That's the first thing we see, and they go about solving.
Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy. I started off as understudying Morgan Freeman in the original production. Just to tell a quick story, one day I was just walking around Broadway for some reason. Morgan got out of the taxi or something. He says, Arthur, he says, I don't know if you do understudies or anything. He says, but there's a part, I'm not going to be in it long. He says, but there's a part in this play I'm doing. You'd be great and you should investigate. He said, but I don't know if you do understudies. So I said, well, okay. So essentially he mentioned that to me, and then it came up, with the agency and stuff. So then I ended up understudying in that.
And then taking over. Did you not go into this part?
No, I didn't take over. Earl Hyman took over when Morgan left. I went on a lot when Morgan was there because it was the beginning of Morgan's film career. And I know he had said at that point he's going to be out. So they both had Dana Ivey, who was the original Mr.
Yes.
They both had a 6-month contract, 26-week contract. But with Morgan, every time he was out, he had to do 26 weeks. So if he was gone 3 weeks, they just added it on. He had to do. he had to pull those 26 weeks. So he was out a lot. So I did get to do it a lot when Morgan was doing it. But yeah. So, but there are so many off-Broadway places and down in base. There was a church, I forget where it was, and they had stuff in the basement. I remember you'd go down. But I took whatever. My answer was yes. In all kinds of places, where they just threw a theater together. I did them all.